Root and Branch. I told you to leave. The words held a weight that Jadago had never known, and in that split second the Tabaxi experienced many things. The smile of the wretched Tao, the way reality fell away from him as his friends heard nothing of his desperate screams. How he had floated through a star-filled expanse for what seemed an aimless eternity, and the sensation of falling feet first upwards until his paws met the spongy loam of a green land. Jadago lurched forward and vomited, dropping the weapons he still held as his mind fought with the delirium that had taken him. He felt as if he had landed on a ceiling and grasped at what seemed to be the ivy on the ground, expecting the sensation of falling back down again, but it never came. He dropped, upwards, into the leafy bed and lay on his back to stare into a strange sky full of colour and strange hues. How long he lay there he could not tell, but slowly his senses started coming back. He felt like the ground was the ground again, and he began to hear his surroundings for the first time. The birdsong, the calls of unknown wildlife, and the sigh of the wind. He sat up to look around. Where was he? What had happened? One moment he was dancing with the Earth Genie and sending it back to its foul domain. The next he was... what? Banished? He had no idea where he was or how to get home. He was, for all intents and purposes, dead to all he knew and loved. Poor Muezza, he thought. What is to become of my beautiful cousin? The area in which Jadago sat was obviously a forest clearing, but it differed in many ways. The trees were bigger than usual and extremely healthy. Not a diseased leaf among them. They were numerous and stretched out as far as he could see, that being not too far because of the dense foliage that blocked the horizon. And the insects were so numerous that Jadago almost panicked, but there was no need. The ants, bees, and other nameless creepy crawlies seemed unconcerned with the Tabaxi's presence, and carried on with their mundane activities. Jadago stood and recovered his weapons from the loam, sheathing them as he wondered what his next step should be. Choose a direction, he thought. Choose a direction and see where it takes you. The Swashbuckler chose and began to push through the greenery into whatever wild he was to face. It was pretty clear, after what seemed like an hour, that the horizon, or what he could see at the limit of his vision, was not getting any closer. What is this place? He wondered in frustration. He had begun to feel nervous in this alien land, and once or twice he had observed disturbingly large creatures displaying predatory behaviour. He had hoped they thought him a meal too insignificant, but he couldn't be certain of it. That said, all his attempts so far to make any headway in the forest were not working. For some reason, the rules of his world did not matter here. Indeed they do not, came a voice from above. Jadago was already moving, and his rapier was drawn before the creature had ended its sentence. Despite this, he could see no enemy to engage with. He could only hear a strange ripple, almost like rain on a lake, before he realised something was laughing at him. "Show me your face, varmint!" the Tabaxi called out into the air. More laughter, and this time it rose to the sound of thunder, so loud that Jadago had to cover his ears. The rumble slowly disappeared, and he was left again staring into the canopy of the trees above him. "I said," came a voice from behind him, and he tried to spin, but was somehow rooted to the spot. "That they do not. Your rules, they mean nothing here." Jadago was panicking now. He was completely held by something behind him that had him at its mercy. He felt a strange sensation in his lower legs, and saw, with what sight he had without turning his head, that he was indeed rooted to the spot. Actual roots were growing out of his calves and his arms were beginning to turn into branches. The voice behind him laughed again with the sound of rain. "You make a good tree," it said, "but that's not why you were directed here." Directed? Jadago's head was spinning. Was this not the Tao's intention then? Indeed not. The Tabaxi's roots began to withdraw from the ground, and his arms were once again his own. He turned cautiously to expect a powerful adversary. An old, almost naked, emaciated human in a loincloth was facing him, sitting on a giant mushroom. Jadago was frustrated. "Get out of my head," he shouted, baring his teeth. "Why would I do that?" the old man returned, smiling a toothless grin. "I get to know all the gritty stuff this way." Jadago unconsciously took a step forward and went for his dagger. "Ah, no," the old man said. "We won't have any of that." And in the blink of an eye, both Jadago's rapier and razor, his trusty dagger, were flung out of their scabbards into the sky above, seemingly not to return to the ground. Unarmed and confused, Jadago collapsed to the loam and stared at the man. "What do you want with me, old man? If you wanted me dead, I'd be dead already. Am I some toy for you to play with? Some kind of pet? Is that why you delivered me here?" The wizened man frowned. "Toy? Nay, this is not child's play at all." He stood and leapt the 5 feet from the top of the mushroom to the ground with surprising agility before standing face to face with the Tabaxi. Jadago noted how his skin was like leather in some places and bark in others, and there were symbols upon it he could not discern. "You are an instrument of my sisters and brothers," he said, "but you require tuning. I shall get you singing a happy song." "You talk in riddles, ridiculous riddles, old man," Jadago replied, frustrated. "And with that you prove me right," the old man returned. Jadago was perplexed. "Speak plainly, old man." "I will speak as I have always done," the old man said in a commanding tone, whilst beckoning Jadago towards a path that seemed to have appeared in the forest ahead of them. "Take the journey indicated. Learn of the past. Learn of the present. Choose your fate. I have spoken." And with that, the old man disappeared in a flash of light, which at the same time conjured an image of an acorn in Jadago's mind. Alone and without his blades, Jadago stood at the path's beginning, which seemed to wind through a tunnel of low-hanging trees into darkness. With no other option clear for him to take, Jadago stepped onto the path. The world fell away from him again. All but the path was darkness. Then there was a light, and as Jadago walked towards it, it began pulsating in a purple and black colour that seemed to suggest menace. As its pulsating increased in frequency, the light was joined by many others that surrounded it in a mass of different coloured orbs. Each one suddenly flung out a tendril of energy, and together they seemed to keep the pulsating under control. On occasion, one tendril would break, and the pulsating would speed up again, but the tendril would soon be replaced to keep the purple light under control. Jadago walked further along the path, and the image changed to show the same purple and black light, but it was larger, and the other orbs were diminished. The tendrils of energy were all but broken, and Jadago could sense an overwhelming sense of anxious chaos. As he continued to watch, the orbs retreated, and 5 new orbs appeared to surround the evil-looking light. After a moment, one moved to sit next to the purple light, while 3 of the others sat apart. The final one began to move towards Jadago until it suddenly enveloped him in green light, and his vision changed once more. He was in a small cavern with 2 exits. One led towards a green light, whilst the other led to what looked like his lost rapier and dagger. floating there in midair, ready for him to recover. And in the centre of the cavern was the purple light, from which came the undeniable temptation of power. Jadargo was at a three-way fork in the road, and his fate depended on the choice before him. He had to choose. Now. As he stepped through it, the green light enveloped Jadargo, with a warm sensation reminiscent of early spring. The cavern was no longer visible, as the glow seemed to permeate his fur and skin. In his mind's eye he saw the wizened old man, still sitting on his mushroom, in his near-naked state. He turned and grinned at Jadargo for a split second, before disappearing. Appearing before the Tabaxi, floating within arm's reach, was a strange staff. He reached for it, almost unconsciously. As he felt the fur on his body become more bristly and stiff, he perceived that the staff was actually two items perfectly fitted together. Pulling them apart, he saw that the larger section was like a rapier, but with an edge like the thorn of a rose, only razor sharp. The shorter section was a gnarly, root-like spike, with a point that seemed to ooze a strange, menacing fluid. As Jadargo grasped the hilts of the legendary ironwood weapons, root and branch, he felt his feet lift from whatever surface he was on and experienced the familiar feeling of being flung across the multiverse. In the blink of an eye, he was back in Tyre Bessel, and he could hear the desperate calls of his friends as they faced a dreadful enemy. Thank you for listening to the progress of my Dungeons & Dragons group as they make their way through the Princes of the Apocalypse campaign setting. Watch out for further episodes, where the party continue their battle with the Dow, but this time with Jadargo and his new toys.